All right, let's talk before the comeback. Sloppy game like we got into. Kenny Pickett, awful night. Najee Harris unable to run the football, although he was an absolute monster there at the end. And then the defense obviously held their own. But I want to point to whose fault it was. Steve Smith, I'm sure you watched the broadcast. So you might have heard this in person. Went off on Matt Canada, calling him a Saturday coach, saying that, the Connor Hayward run at the end, which I agree 100%. Why would you wait until you have to close out the game to run your best offensive play of the night? Very Saturday-like coach. That's what he kept calling him, not built for the pros. Do you put that on Matt Canada? Do you put it on Kenny Pickett? Do you put it on the inability to run the football? What's your takeaway there for a slow start?
Yeah, I think the inability to run the football was huge. Like you said, it wasn't Kenny's best night. I don't think anyone expected it to really be. I mean, it was a tough environment in a lot of ways. So, you can't exactly – I didn't expect Kenny to throw for 300 yards or anything like that. So running the football was huge. I think the Raiders knew that. I think the Steelers knew that. I think everyone in that building knew that. And when you weren't able to do that, everything else suffers. You become one-dimensional, and you become one-dimensional in an environment that is not built for that dimension.
Yep.
Yeah, but the conservatism was a little bit by design, I think. But not being able to run the football was huge, especially for this. Like, just go back every other week of the season. Running the football has been huge. Like the difference between, like, I think the story of the season is going to be pre-bye week versus post-bye week, and you can see the inability. Like, running the football has been the key for this offense and for this entire team for the whole season. When it doesn't show up, they don't look great.
No, they do. That's exactly what it is. Like, you have to go back to the foundation of the Steelers offense, which is Najee Harris and his ability to run the football. And when it doesn't work, things don't click. But at the same time, I feel like you have to find a way to make things click if it doesn't, because Kenny Pickett isn't a terrible quarterback anymore. He's not a great quarterback, but he did. I thought he had the worst night he's had since the bye week was Saturday night. But I think that there's factors that play into that. The fact that, like you said, it was freezing cold, like ridiculously cold outside. There was a ton of emotion. He's wearing a new helmet with a visor. I don't care what anybody says. It's got to be weird. You're coming off a missed week. So all that groove that you had coming out of the bye week, gone. And I feel like there was more pressure on that situation than there was in any game he's played so far in this career. It's the playoffs are here if you win, they're gone if you lose. You have the memory of Franco Harris, and everybody keeps reminding you how big that night is. And you're at home. It's your first game back. It's Christmas Eve. It's just a lot to put on somebody. So I didn't expect him to have the greatest night, but he did. He had a very poor night, but I still think that you had to be able to find ways to get things going. And I just didn't see that, like the Deontay Johnson throws were perfect. You got to get Pat Freiermuth involved. Obviously, Najee Harris at the end was an absolute monster. But the amount of limitation that you put on a guy like George Pickens, which is what stands out the most to me when you criticize Matt Canada in this game, is the guy that was guarding George Pickens was a third stringer 2 weeks ago, Amik Robertson. Rocky Singh goes down with an injury. Sidney Jones is so bad he gets benched. So they put Amik Robertson in. 2 years into the league now, I believe. The dude is 5'8". 5'8". George Pickens is 6'3" on a bad day. He's 6'5" on a good day. And when he jumps, he's 7'4". And you don't throw the ball to him more than, I believe he had, 5 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. And that the last one was, it was a great throw and it was a great design, but I thought you could have threw that up to him all night long. He would have found the football, probably could have had 150 yards. I just think that in this game, it was another example of how limited they keep some of these guys.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I've seen this for weeks. Like, it's the just throw it to George Pickens. And he's never as open as, not never as open, but like, people pretend like he is always open even when he's covered. And I think that is it is a bad, like, it would be a bad lesson to teach Kenny, or a bad thing to tell Kenny, just throw it up to him. You don't want him forcing these throws at all. Like, I can understand wanting to get George the ball more, but like we can pump the brakes a little bit. Like let's not convince our rookie quarterback to just throw into tight coverage every time just because we think our guy is better. I
Good
don't
point.
know. Like at a certain point, George has to like create some separation and get open. Like this isn't, your point is well taken. George is a great player and a good player, and he's going to be even better. And he's got to have opportunities for those contested catches, but you got to time him up right. You can't just force feed him. I don't know. I don't know. I go back and forth on this a lot, but I never put. I don't know. I think George can do a lot more too. And I think
Yeah.
he's got a ways to go before you can treat him, before we can talk about him in that way as a just kind of throw it up to him whenever you get the chance kind of guy.
I agree. I like that point about you. That's a bad thing to teach Kenny Pickett, because it definitely is a bad thing to teach Kenny Pickett. So you are right there. I honestly, I think the biggest like you brought up the run game. I thought it was Kenny. I think that even what did Najee finish with? 16 rushes, 53 yards. Like it's not a great game, but it's still 53 yards on the ground. Like you keep pounding away with 3-yard carries, you get a first down. I mean, it takes 4 plays, but you get a first down. I think that it does. Like a lot of it comes back to Kenny. I don't know if I have the Matt Canada criticism that Steve Smith has, but I do always blame the offensive coordinator, because I just don't think that. I think there's too much talent for it not to be clicking the way that it needs to be clicking. Like 13 to 10 is a game where, yeah, 13 to 10 is a win, whatever, but the Steelers have the weapons to score 25 points a game. And I think that should be the standard, is them scoring 25 points a game. And they're not. Like they win 19 to 10, 19 to 13, 13 to 10, 16 to 10. And I get the NFL is down in scoring, but you have to be able to find the end zone. It just feels like things stall out when they don't need to stall out. But to your point, you got to be open. You got to make good plays. If you're Kenny Pickett, it's bad teaching. So, that is a defense for Matt Canada, no doubt.
Yeah. And I mean, also, like the other thing is, I don't know if we're having this conversation in this way if like Deontay Johnson could catch a ball in the end zone, like
Yeah, true.
like I don't know, like this isn't. I don't know. At some point, your stars have to play like stars, and like Najee just has to do it. Deontay just has to do it. Like I think that's a big part of it too. I think we kind of underrate how often guys like that just haven't shown up. And of course, it can always go back to the offensive coordinator. He's got to take a lot of the responsibility for this when stuff like that happens. But when you're a team scoring 20 points a game or less than 20 points a game, there's a lot of blame to go around. There always is.
That's very true. That is very true. Like you do have to look at the guys, and Deontay hasn't shown up from time to time. And he had a big drop in this one too. Najee hasn't shown up for time. I mean, the first half of the season. I think he showed up big in the second half of this game.
Oh yeah.
George, and again, Kenny's got to show up from time to time. So that is true. I don't know. I weigh it on both sides. Like I think the Steelers have the talent if that talent works. And I think there's other teams that show this. Like, you get a really high powered offense, and I don't expect the Steelers to have a really high powered offense, maybe ever. But you get a guy like Kyle Shanahan, you get a guy like Sean McVay, Andy Reid.
Cliff Kingsbury might be looking for a job. Like
Cliff Kingsbury, he could be looking for a job, but that's what I'm saying. Like those offenses, it doesn't matter who you put it in there, unless it's Trace McSorley. You win football games, and you have a really high powered offense. I mean, Baker Mayfield walked into Los Angeles a week and a half ago. The dude looks like a whole new quarterback. And I don't expect somebody to come in here and make Kenny Pickett a Hall of Famer. I just think that if you have a really good offense, you create the space with your play calls to have the success, have the bare minimum success. You still need those guys to make big plays. But I think that if you could create a play that gets Deontay Johnson open or gets George Pickens open, you don't have to rely on their talent as much as, these guys are. Like San Francisco is not packed to the gills with talent. They're working with Brock Purdy at quarterback, and their biggest names are Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuels. And those are huge names. But everybody else outside of George Kittle, who doesn't even do much in the passing game, is essentially just like a middle tier offensive weapon, and all of them make plays. And I think the same way, I mean, Los Angeles has literally nobody. Tyler Higbee was going off last night. Nobody knows who Tyler Higbee is outside of, people who watch that game. I just think that you could sculpt plays to help your guys. And I just don't know if Canada does that. But at the same time, like, I'm not trying to pull away from, because I think you're right about the talent thing. You do have to come up with plays if you have that talent. And I don't think the Steelers, I think it's a mix.
Yeah, I mean, it always is. I don't want to take away any blame from Matt Canada. Like, he certainly hasn't been as good as everyone would have hoped. But yeah, like I said, there's tons of blame to share when you score 16 points in a football game. Even when you win.
I agree.